afternoon, whatever time zone you're watching me in. I am Kadisha Henry. Today, we will be talking about data protection, right? So, we are on the topic data protection. So, today, our objectives for today is data classification, data ownership, data states, data types, data sovereignty, securing data, data loss prevention, and configuring data loss prevention. Um, we are going to be looking at each concept. So, concepts like data classification, and then we're going to look at scenarios on data classification and multiple choices on data classifications. Okay, so that's the way we are going to be doing the class. So, relax, grab something, pause and restart when you feel like it. I will make it as clear as possible so you can understand, and that's why I give a lot of scenarios and multiple choices to reinforce the each concepts that you learn. So then this segment is all about data protection. So we have to understand that we're living in a digital age, and data is like the lifeblood of every organization. And safeguarding those valuable assets is very important to the success of the organization. And it also helps to avoid costly breach. And many times we hear in the public place that data have been breached, data malicious individual got into the system, or whether it's being social media, whether it's being different in different organization, we always hear of data breaches, right? And I want you to um, get into the habit of reading cybersecurity news and data breaches and all of that. I am going to be looking for a few news in the media and data breach, and show you how every day organizations are putting out information and different breaches that occurs, and it gives you a deeper understanding of the whole concepts of protecting data and data breaches, right? That occurs. So every organization wants to know that their data are secure, meaning that it's encrypted, it is in a state where malicious individuals cannot gain unauthorized access to the data. And we preserve data in such a way that even if unauthorized individual get and hands on the data, they cannot read those data. Okay, so many times persons, malicious attackers get to data, and the reason they're able to sell those data or hold those data at ransom, because sometimes the organization didn't encrypt the data, they didn't take the necessary precautionary measures in ensuring that those data were protected in whatever state it was in, right? And so what happened is that when data are not protected, it can cost the reputation of an organization. It can cost the reputation of the organization, because if Wells Fargo Bank don't encrypt their data properly and malicious individual gets in it, steal the customer's social security, steal their sensitive information, then that organization lose their reputation, because it is going to be known by the public as a place, a financial institution that does not do well in securing their information. And it's the same thing with any companies. If you don't secure the customer data properly and it gets out there now, because you have to understand that when there is a data breach, you have to let the stakeholders and other people who are involved know. You have to let the public know, and that's the reason when place like Toyota and all of these places, when they got breached and their data were leaked, they had to tell it to the public, because the public have to know that their information are out there. How do you think that people get information on the dark web because and selling it people's identity because somebody breached a system, a malicious attacker breached a system, stole the data, and then sell them elsewhere. Okay, so when we going through this topic, then we'll get a better understanding and a clarity in our mind of this old data that we hear in the public place that have been breached. It's absolutely important, guys, especially if you're going to be working in the cybersecurity space and you're going to be exposed to information and you are going to be the ones that are responsible for the data protection in that company. So there are many different ways we can protect data from the hands of malicious person or insiders. Insiders are also threats to information, our data, company's data. And that's why, again, when the last class we talk about, I don't remember if it was in the last class, about limiting data access and restricting who can gain access to information, who so we have a sysadmin and all of these people because they restrict who can handle those sensitive data. Can you imagine, let's say, KFC. KFC is a big place, or Coca-Cola for that matter. And Coca-Cola have never released to the public what are their ingredients in making their Coca-Cola. Because those data, they secure them. And I could imagine it's just person who they feel that are trustworthy enough to gain access to that high level of sensitive information. Because can you imagine the Coca-Cola ingredient gets out there, the data get out there, get breached, get out there, and then people start to duplicate it and replicate it and start to make so that you have never heard of their secret of how they make this Coca-Cola. And it's the same thing from many other organizations. You never get their information. One of the thing that came out this week in the news was that I didn't open AI didn't really have their information out there so that other developer could build upon it. That's what I was told in the news by reading the news. But then China came out with another company called DeepSeek, which is another AI company, and so they allow their information to be out there because first of all, OpenAI secure theirs, right? Because they didn't want anybody to replicate it, so they secure it. So in every organization, because this is money, right? And another thing, not only can they lose reputation of these data, so when you go on these platforms and you sign up on the platform, you put in your credit card, you put in your information, they have to secure those information. Some organization ask for your social, some ask for your passport information, but they have to secure those. Okay, and you can also have financial loss if your data are not protected. How do they get financial loss? How does this go to towards financial loss? Because if you have a product developing and you have those information and those information get out in the public or they breach the system and steal the information, you didn't have them back up, you didn't have them encrypt, you lose. You're gonna lose big time because they weren't backup and there's no way to get them, and you have already invested in the product design and all of that, and then it gets out there, so you now are at a financial loss because you didn't take the necessary step in protecting your data. Big financial loss too, because if other people decide to sue, what if it's a certain level of information like HIPAA, the hospital, you lose the patient information and they decide to sue you. HIPAA is the company that covers them, the data privacy. But what if the hospital decides that they didn't, or let's not say decide, they didn't take the necessary measure to follow the guideline given by HIPAA, right? And they lose the patient information or the patient's information gets into the wrong. That's a financial loss because they can be sued. right? And it goes for every organization that is entrusted with the data of individual. You can have a financial loss if those data are not following regulation and guideline, whether internally or externally, right? So there are certain places that give guideline as to how data are protection, and one of them is the card company, right? The card company is a company that tells how data must be protected. The customer data must be protected. They tell how many times there should be, what kind of process it should go through to protect those information rather. So when we talk about data, we're saying data refer to raw facts, figures, and information that can be processed, stored, or transmitted to, um, for 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 different purpose, right? To make decision, you know, in all of those things. And it's done in various format. It can be structured, unstructured, or semi-structured. So they are raw datas, facts, and information that can be processed, stored, and it can be used for decision. It supports in decision. So that's what we'll say datas are. Okay, so data protection. When we talk about the whole idea of data protection, we're talking about, it refer to strategies and practice used to secure the data from unauthorized access, corruption, and or loss, right? So data protection is a strategy that we use and practice to secure the data from unauthorized access, corruption, or loss. It ensures data integrity. Remember, we dealt with data integrity. It ensures confidentiality and it ensures availability, which are crucial for an organization handling a sensitive and critical information. Now, let's look at this a little, because it's a way, and we have different means and ways in which we can protect our data at different phases in the CIA triad. The whole aim is for you to have data integrity, data confidentiality, and data available. That's the whole aim of data protection. Because if, let's look at integrity. If it is that somebody is able to get to the information and change, modify, alter that data, alter that information, then the data integrity would have been lost. And that's the reason for data integrity we do hashing, right? Hashing, right? We do things like hashing the data. And so we know that this is the original data. So no one altered the data. When we talk about confidentiality, we're talking about encryption to ensure that no one gets this information and is able to use it because it's encrypted. So we are trying to protect our integrity, we're trying to protect our confidentiality. We're trying to protect our availability. And in the availability world, we use different means to make sure that the data is available when needed to by the users, right? So it is very crucial in the way we handle sensitive information. So it's a practice of securing data from unauthorized access and corruption, because not only can somebody access, a malicious attacker access your information without authorization, but they also can inject SQL in your database and corrupt your information. They can go to your website and do cross-site scripting, right? They can do all of those and destroy your data. So what we're saying is that we're doing whatever is necessary to ensure unauthorized individuals, malicious attackers, insiders don't get access to these level of information. So we have to implement strategies, right? And enforce practices that will keep unauthorized individuals. And for those who are within the organization, we ensure that they are given restriction as to what information they can gain access to, right? Because our our malicious attackers are not only external, but we also have malicious individuals that are within the organization, and those are the most dangerous set of people, the people who understand the configuration and the system internally, because if they can use maybe disgruntled, I will say, maybe not happy with the pay that they're getting, maybe upset with management, and they decided that they're going to corrupt your data. They can do malicious act to corrupt your data, injecting virus, worms, and other malware to corrupt your data, right? And so that's why we have access control in an organization. Access control list denied. So we deny access to some people and we allow some to gain certain level of access to information because we don't want them to corrupt the data, right? All right. So let's look at classification of data. Classification of data. So now we look at what is data, and we look at why we're trying to protect the data, because we want to be able to have confidentiality, integrity, and availability. That's the whole aim of cybersecurity. Those three pillars are of cybersecurity is what everything is centered around: confidentiality, integrity, and availability. The whole cyber world is surrounded around that. That's what we're trying to protect, right? So when we look at data classification is the process of organizing data based on its sensitivity and value to ensure appropriate security control are applied. Data classification is the process of organizing the data based on sensitivity and value to ensure security control are applied. So when we have certain kind of information, okay, so let's take the government for an example to give us a broader perspective. There are certain information in the military that are classified information, sensitive information, highly sensitive, highly confidential, that there are some people that are not allowed to gain access to those information, highly sensitive information. The record, like the president of the country or the prime minister of a country, very confidential. Their medical records, highly confidential. Records that are secret agents alone must see, highly sensitive and confidential information. Those information have to be kept in such a way that nobody, no outside enemies can get them. No outside enemies should get the military information. No, you see, that's why that's the war in the world, right? Because everybody is trying to protect their territory. They're trying to protect their information. That's why people say, oh, China is an enemy to America, because China is always trying to get America's secret information, right? So they're always at it, cyber professionals, and at it to make sure that the data of the United States is always so secure that no one can get access to it. And it's the same thing in every organization. The data, whatever is public, whatever it's internal, confidential, or highly confidential, we're trying to protect these. So let's look at public one. So data can be public, it can be internal, confidential, and it can be highly confidential, right? So when we talk about public data, data freely available to the public, such as the company contact information. So data can be public information. That means you and I can always go up there. We can Google, we can look up whatever tactics or methods we're using, or mode of apparatus that we're using. We can get those data because they are always public. These data, anybody have access to them. right? And then we talk about internal data. Data used literally, data that are used literally internally, like employees' record or financial report. These are data that are very sensitive and usually is only certain level of management or department should have access. So that's why again we give restriction. So even though you can go, you can be authorized to go on the company um, desktop or the or their system, but you can only see information within your work scope or your department. So a CNA nurse can go to the hospital, they can sign on to the general system, but they are not able to see, and they're internal, but they are not able to see the patient record. Only what is given to them by sysadmin, the access that is given to them, that's all they can access, right? So those are internal data, and those data are protected with access control or some form of restriction. Confidentiality. Sensitive data requiring restrict access like customer data or trade secret, right? So these are confidential information. Nobody want to give away their trade secrets. Nobody wants everybody and everyone to access their personal confidential information, right? So when we talk, these are secret. We talk about um was it Coca-Cola not long ago, their trade secret, they hide their trade secret. They don't want the general public to know what are their trade secret, because what sense would it make giving everybody your trade secret, right? What sense will it make giving your data to other countries that are enemies to the United States? So we want to make sure that these data are kept in a confidential way, that nobody, and so many times organization, when they are hiring individuals, then let they sign a document, right? Sign a do not a non-disclosure documents of their information. That means if you work for my company and you got access to my sensitive information, if you go out there and try to duplicate or replicate my information or sell it, you can always be taken to court, right? Those are confidential information. And because you were a part of the organization and probably working with that department, you got access. So we have to protect ourselves from the person who is there too. So say, sign these documents, right? And then we have highly confidential. Highly confidential, right? Most sensitive data requires strict control and encryption, right? So while within the organization of confidentiality, the data that is confidential, we can allow you to sign papers saying you won't disclose the information, all of that. But the highly confidential information, those are information we encrypt, right? We have to encrypt these information whether by asymmetric or symmetric, right? We have to find a way to encrypt the information when we are transferring those information, when those information are stored, when those information are at rest. We have to are in process. We have to make sure these information are encrypted. So even if a malicious individual try to intercept the communication, intercept the information, because of the encryption that is applied to the information, they are not able to read it because it's all coded. It's all information they cannot read, and we have to make it the encryption so that they cannot use any form of tactics to decipher the information, they are decrypt the information, right? So sensitive data, these are data again that can create reputational loss, it can create financial loss, it can put the business back in bankruptcy, So, as cybersecurity professionals going out there in the world of cybersecurity, you have to understand that there are many times organizations are going to allow you into their sensitive database, because you're probably doing ethical hacking. You can be probably doing, the same pen testing. You'll probably be the person responsible for their network security, and you are going to be exposed to information that belong to an organization. And that's the reason they will bring it through a process of you signing off on documents, because these information are sensitive. And as pen testers or cybersecurity personnel, you cannot go out and just divulge information, highly sensitive, highly confidential information. You cannot divulge those information. They are unique to the company, right? And so encrypting those information may be one of your tasks to guide the organization through the process of protecting their data, which one of them is encryption, right? So encrypting our information is extremely important. We are never to take it lightly that you are given information and you just be slappy with the information. So those are data classification: public, internal, confidential, highly confidential. Public, anybody can get it. Internal, within the organization: employee record, financial report. Confidential, sensitive data requires strict access. And when we talk about confidential, we can think about many organizations, right? When we think about highly sensitive confidential, we can think about the many organizations: government, the army, the air force, all of these places, sensitive information. They're called class. Sometimes in the public places we hear they say they are classified information. So let's look at some important data, the importance of data classification. So regulatory compliance, ensuring adherence to legal and industrial mandates. So when we talk about data classification, there are outside entities that will enforce that you comply in ensuring those data are kept secure. We call those data, we call those regulatory compliance. It ensures that you adhere to the legal and industrial mandate. One of those is credit card company, okay? Regulatory compliance, they ensure the regulation said that data must be encrypted. This is the way you handle the customer data. This is the way. So these are regulations, and if you break those regulations or go against those regulations, you can be fined. You can lose the license for your company. You can lose your what we call, I'm not going to put that in there yet, but there's something I was going to talk about your the certificate of authority, but I guess that is going to come up, so let me not mention it here. But regulatory compliance ensure you the adherence to the legal and industrial mandate that you must follow in these classification of data. Risk management help you to identify and mitigate risk, security risk associated with your information. And you have efficient data handling, um, how you store data, retrieval of data, and security measure that you put in place to ensure that all these data that we just talked about, the classification, how all of these are managed and handled. You do have organization that tells you, and these are the regulatory compliance, risk management, efficient data, and you got to tell how you're going to treat these data. Okay, so let's look at public data, and with a scenario, right? We're going to look at scenario public data. Public data exposure in a social media breached. A social media company publicly share users engagement strategies, right? Including the most popular hashtags, general use trend. However, a malicious configuration, however, A misconfiguration. I'm sorry. Let's read that over. Social media company public publicize a social media company shares users engagement strategy. They publicly share the users engagement strategies, including the most popular hashtags, general usage trends. However, a misconfigured server also exposed internal development logs containing API keys. While the engagement strategies are public data, the API key should have been classified as highly sensitive data and protected accordingly. So while the other information, they are public information, the API key is a very um, classified information or highly sensitive data, right? That should not be leaked because most people sell their API keys. That is it. Many organizations they sell their API, right? So if you look at this information and analyze it, you can share hashtags, you can share usage trend, but when you misconfigure the system to expose internal development logs containing the API, that's a problem. So we said that while the engagement strategies are public data, the API key should have been classified as a highly sensitive data and protected accordingly. Do you see that? Do you see where the data of the or the information contained in the API should have been protected? Let's look at another one. Internal data leak from a corporate wiki. A software A software company maintains an internal knowledge base with details on software architect and internal workflows. A misconfigured cloud storage buckets allow external users to access these documents. Since this information is classified as internal data, the company quickly revoke access and strengthen access control to prevent future exposure. So this is internal data now, right? So the software company maintain an internal knowledge base with details on software architects and internal workflows. A misconfigured cloud storage buckets allow external users to access these documents. That's a bad misconfiguration, but it does happen. If you have a misconfiguration on your system, it can allow, and one of them can be default access, right? You didn't change and restrict access. So sometimes it's a misconfiguration, sometimes they don't change the default settings, right? And so for users to get information on your internal knowledge base, right, of your architect, your software architect, that's financial problem and reputation in the long run, because you could actually lose, right? Somebody could take your idea, replicate it, take your idea and build their own. So you lose. So you're in competition with another company over what was yours and should have been kept confidential. And guys, many times you're going to be sitting over these systems and you have to do the configuration. And that's why we said use a sandbox to do your testing, because when you use a sandbox environment, you test it and you see how it runs and all of that. So if there's any misconfiguration, you find it out, right? Because you are going to be given the task of configuring the company's system. And if misconfiguration causes these data to be out there, that's the big thing. That's a big thing. So we have to be mindful, and that's why we have checks. We have checks to ensure. and process and procedures to ensure that the necessary step is taken to prevent misconfiguration. So we are saying this information is classified as internal data, and the company, they said, quickly revoke access and strengthen access control to prevent further exposure. So when they revoke access, that means those who have privileges, maybe root privilege, some may have, privilege to read, write, and execute. So they quickly restrict who can access the data, right? Who can access it? And what can you do to those data if you have any right to the data? So let's look at the insider threat. Insider threat exposing weak data um, classification. So this should be insider threat exposing. Sorry, I'm sorry. I keep saying exposing. It's exploring insider threat, exploring weak data classification. Exposing, probably in my mind, the whole cybersecurity, exposing, exploring. So exploiting. The word is exploiting. It's not exploring and it's not exposing. It's exploiting. Um, I think I took up my glasses and I don't know where my glasses is. I'm thinking I'm seeing wrong, right? So forgive me for that one. The word is insider threat, exploiting weak data classification. That is it. So I'm sorry. A system administrator at a technology company has access to confidential client data but finds that some internal reports are mistakenly classified internal as internal data instead of highly sensitive data. Taking advantage of misclassification, they exfiltrate the data to a competitor before a security team detect the breach. So a system administrator at a technology company has access to confidential client data, right? But finds that some internal reports are mistakenly classified as internal data instead of highly sensitive data. Taking advantage of the misclassification, they exfiltrate the data to a competitor before a security team detect the breach. So insider threat exploiting weak data classification. So in this scenario, the system administrator, right, who have access to the confidential client data, finds out that some internal reports are mistakenly classified as internal data instead of highly sensitive data. Highly sensitive data are can be data belong to an organization, but there can also be high governmental information, right? Or data that should not be accessed because of the sensitivity of the data, should not be accessed by anybody, right? So because they see that the data um, was misclassified, they took advantage of that and steal the information, right? The competitor in this scenario would be the one that takes the information, and they didn't alert anyone maybe that the data came to them. So can you imagine Apple and another company is our competitors, and you have somebody working in the organization, and that person, instead of saying this information is classified, they allow it to highly classified or highly sensitive. they just classify it as internal information, which sometimes many persons within the organization have access to it. Can you imagine? They classify the secret of making Apple phone as just internal, and then if somebody in the organization accidentally send that information to a competitor, Apple will be done. They will finish because a competitor now have their secret of how they make the Apple phone or making Tesla. And instead of making the information of how Tesla is developed highly sensitive data, they just classify it as just internal data, right? Whatever way they did it, they just classify this is just internal data. Maybe everybody within can have access to it, or however the organization policies are. But there are certain level of information of how Tesla is developed that you cannot classify those information as just internal. They got to be highly sensitive. That means this data, because of the cost to the company and the reputation that it will cost for the company, we have to protect this highly sensitive data. I hope you're getting a better understanding. I'm sorry for that glitch in the reading. Let's look at confidential employee data sent. Confidential employee data sent to the wrong recipient, right? An HR employee at a cybersecurity firm accidentally email employees performance review and salary detail to the entire company instead of just the HR manager. This confidential data exposure leads to an internal security investigation and restrict enforcement of data loss prevention policy. So an HR employee at a cybersecurity firm accidentally emailed employees' performance review and salary details to the entire company instead of just the HR manager. Right? This is confidential data exposure leading to an internal security investigation and stricter enforcement of data loss prevention. Why? Because now everybody in the organization, this is internal, right? Knows what your pay is, what amount of money you get for your pay, right? So now they are knowing how much money you get for your pay. That ain't nobody wants that. So now they have to investigate the situation, and now they have to enforce stricter enforcement on data loss prevention, because this could have gone otherwise. This could have gone to the wrong place, maybe not internal, but because there is no restriction and no enforcement of those restrictions in place, then information can be easily lost or divulged to the wrong people. Let's look at a cloud provider's misclassification of customer logs. And all of us maybe use cloud. A cloud service provider stores users' access log from government clients, right? The logs are mistakenly classified as internal data instead of highly sensitive data, leading to insufficient security protections. A compliance audit forces the provider to reclassify and encrypt these logs under a stricter access policy. So they store users' access log from government clients, right? The logs mistakenly was classified as internal data instead of highly sensitive data. And so when data are classified, remember we said earlier that based on the classification of the data, right, it's probably need access or restriction or encryption, right? So we're saying that this kind of information about users' logs, these are highly sensitive data. And in these cases, there has to be enforcement of compliance, enforcement of providing stricter security or stricter encryption on those logs, stricter policy. And what are the consequences if these information are not protected? Protecting highly sensitive encryption, protecting highly sensitive encryption keys. And so encryption keys, I might not tell you about this right now because this has to do with data encryptions and all of that. Encryption that I may not want to get you involved in at this stage. So let's jump over that one because I don't want to confuse you with data encryption keys because I guess we're going to deal with that, but not here. Public versus internal data in a government cyber policy. So we're saying a government agent releases a public cybersecurity awareness report on best practice for password security. However, detailed vulnerability assessment of national infrastructure system are stored in a separate confidential data repository with strict access control to prevent cyber threat. So we're saying that when we're talking about the whole aspect of data, public versus internal data, that data can be vulnerable. And because data can be vulnerable and create a level of exposure because they're vulnerable, no, they're exposed to threats, right? And then we're at risk of losing something if those data, that's why they said that the data was quickly revoked and stricter access and data prevention loss policy were enforced because now we are exposed. And now, because we're exposed, we have malicious attacker that can come and exploit our weaknesses. And that is the information of the logs that were exposed. So let's look at this one. Multiple choice question and data classification. What is the primary purpose of data classification in cybersecurity? Is it A, delete unnecessary data? B, to ensure data is properly organized and secure based on sensitivity? C, to allow unrestricted data sharing across all departments? D, to prevent data from being accessed by unauthorized user. And we will say the answer is B. So the main reason behind data classification is to ensure that the data is properly organized and secure based on their sensitivity. Data must be organized and it must be secure based on their sensitivity. And we talk about that data can be internal, public, it can also be highly sensitive and confidential. Based on the sensitivity of the information within the organization, you have to secure them, right? Which of the following is an example of public data? A company is making material a company marketing material posts on its website, customer credit card details, employment salary record, trade secret stored in a secret database. And we would say public data is a company making marketing material um, post on a website. So whatever information that people can readily gain access to, marketing material posts at a website, customer credit card, those are sensitive information. Employee salary record, those are confidential. Trade secret, store on a secure database, those are all confidential information that must not be made public. Number three, which classification level is most appropriate for sensitive customers? information such as social security numbers and medical record. Public, internal, confidentiality, highly sensitive. Which classification level is most appropriate for sensitive custom? And we will say all of those, these are highly sensitive, right? Highly sensitive. What classification level should be applied to a company-wide HR policy intended for employees only? A, public, B, internal, C, confidential, D, highly sensitive. And we will say if it's going to be applying to the company-wide HR, we can say they are internal. Which of the following is not a benefit of data classification? Which of them is not a benefit of data classification? Enhancing regulatory compliance, improving data security measure, making all data public accessible, streamlining data across management. Streamlining data across management. I would say making all data publicly available. Making all data publicly available would be the answer. In a government agency, classified national security report should be categorized as public, internal, confidential, highly sensitive. So in a government agency, we said those information are highly sensitive, right? This is government, and those information we don't want them to get to our enemies. Let's move on. An employee accidentally sent internal project roadmap to a third party. This is an example of mishandling which type of data? A, public, B, internal, C, confidential, D, highly sensitive. It will be, the correct answer would be internals, because why they accidentally send an internal project roadmap to a third party? Internal property. So the employee accidentally sent an internal project roadmap to a third party. This is an example of mishandling which type of data. They mishandle the internal data. And this is the reason. So they said what? They accidentally send it. If this data was encrypted, if this data was secure, then the person who get the data would not have any use for the data. What security measure is most commonly applied to confidential data? No security control are needed. Encrypt storage and restrict access. Sharing freely across the internet. Making it publicly available for all employees. And so the answer we get is encrypt storage and restrict access. Yes, because when we said we apply security measures to our data, we want to secure the data and we want to restrict access to those data. We want to encrypt them, right? Encrypt the data, whether through asymmetric or symmetric encryption, whether we're going to hash the data, whatever we're going to do. But we want to make sure that these data are restricted as much as possible, that only persons with authorization, only individuals that are given privilege. So we have access deny and access allow, because we don't want persons who are not authorized to gain any access to this information. You don't know the importance of this until you see company getting sued. You see companies getting into problem, losing their reputations. You don't know until you lose these people information, right? Lose the data, the privacy, or they lose it and they are in a big financial loss. Then that's the time you're going to understand Data needs to be encrypted, encrypt storage, and retrieve access must be applied. Encrypt storage and restrict access, right? So when the data is on the computer, it's at rest, nobody is using it, those data need to be encrypted. And people need to be restricted both inside and outside. Get that? A financial institution database stores encrypted customer banking record. What data classification level applies here? Public, internal, confidential, highly sensitive. So we say that this will be highly sensitive data, right? Highly sensitive. We have to encrypt them so that no one, even if they get out, no one is able to decipher it. Which industry regulation require organization to classify and protect personal health information? I call it HIPAA, right? So HIPAA would be one. The PCI DSS deal with your credit card information. HIPAA deals with confidential information in the hospital. So according to HIPAA, you cannot give data about information about a client without the client consent. You have to protect the data of the client in the organization. You have to ensure that the information about the client is protected in every way. So, this concept of classification of data, you have come to realize now that data is in fact classified. Data is classified in internal, public, highly classified, and confidential. And you have to determine at those stage of the information. We know public is public, but for the others, what information you're going to ensure is protected. And even when it's public, you got to make sure you know what information you're putting in public place and that you're not mistakenly allowing sensitive information to be out there. So think on over these, right? And how it helps you to understand this whole data world that we see people are trying to protect every day with their life. It's the engine of the organization because some are secret, some are trade secrets, some are information that is to the life of the organization, and we have to make sure we protect them. If card companies and those who use cards are not following the PCISDSS, then they can get penalty. They can be fined for not following the regulation of those industry, right? So I want you to timely go through this, look at it, and then we will get back to the other session, okay?